Okay, I'm going to break this painting down into steps that are way easier to follow than you might imagine, so that you can have a go, create this, and amaze yourself. Okay, so as always, I'm going to teach you the painting process and techniques, but hopefully you'll pick up some tips about the app that I'm using, Procreate, as well. But that isn't to say you couldn't use a different app on a different tablet and still follow along. Having said that, within the app Procreate, I'm using their default A4 canvas, which is 297 by 210 millimeters at 300 dpi. And also in terms of the color profile, within Procreate, I'm using their sRGB code, the one that ends in 2.1. Again, it's here on the list within Procreate. I'm also using Procreate's default brushes, and today that will be within inking, the studio pen, within airbrushing, the soft brush, medium brush, and the medium hard brush, the ones at the very top. Within charcoals, maybe the burnt tree brush. Within elements, the clouds brush. And within organic, I'm going to use the rainforest brush, and possibly the snow gum brush as well. And then in terms of the colors, well, I've already pre-selected a color palette, you can see here. Each of these colors, if you go to the value section, has what we call a hexadecimal code associated with it. And I've put each of these codes down in the video description. You just need to copy and paste them into this box area, one at a time, press enter, and the color will appear up here. And then you can tap it into the palette. Or alternatively, next to the codes in the description is a link that takes you to my Patreon page, where you can download the color file for free to save you some time. And Patreon is also the place that you can support this channel and gain access to exclusive content such as extended versions of many of these tutorials. I'd like to say a massive thank you to those people who do support me over at Patreon. It really does make a massive difference and it is hugely appreciated. Thank you so much. And with all of that said and done, I'm going to get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to my colors, pick the first color on the top row, drag it from the color circle at the top into the canvas area, release, and it flood fills the whole canvas. I'm then going to create a new layer, layer 2. I'm going to go to my colors and choose the third color on the bottom row. I'm going to go in with the soft brush with an airbrushing, 20% size, 100% opacity. And I'm just going to do a section either side. Really doesn't need to be particular or neat, just slightly arching it like this. Then adjustments, Gaussian blur, and we're going to blur that in to about the 70%. And it's just going to slightly darken the edges just a little bit. We're then going to go to our layers and create a new layer, layer 3. Go to our colors. We're going to use this second color on the top row. We're going to switch brushes. We're going to go to the organic rainforest brush. We're going to swipe and reset it to show you how I've amended it. Tap on it again. Go to the stroke path. I'm going to change the spacing, which is 27% by default. Slide it up to 45. And click done. I'm going to put the size of that to 10% and 100% opacity, and then just swipe this in at the very top, like so. And then really, I just want to preserve some of that texture at the very top, but underneath that, I can go over it a few more times. Really, I'm just looking to blot it in. It's just that top area where I want some of those gaps. Don't need to have too many, just a few. Then maybe I can switch brush to the airbrushing soft brush, 20% size, 100% opacity again, and I can just continue to fill that in so it's more solid. And then with this layer, I'm going to go to the adjustments, Gaussian blur, and I'm going to blur that in to about the 6% and deselect. And it's just softened that in a little bit more. I'm going to go back to my layers, tap on layer 3 and put on what we call alpha lock. And all that does, if I just change to a more dramatic color, you'll see, is if we go over the areas now, you see it's contained within the textures that we've got. So you can see the gaps still remain, even when you color over it. But we're not going to use that color, wouldn't be appropriate. We're going to use the third color on the top row. We are going to use the soft brush with an airbrushing, 20% size, maybe 50% opacity, and about halfway, do a band of this, go over it a few times, and just take it up between here and here. It's about halfway, so it doesn't quite get to the textured parts. Just stop a little bit shy of that. Press more lightly so it feathers up. Then we'll go to the fourth color on the top row. Same brush, same settings, and just a little bit under halfway now. We'll do a band of that, maybe go over it a couple of times. Maybe just lightly press it slightly up so it merges ever so slightly. But we've got other tools. We can go to the adjustments, the Gaussian blur. We can blur all of that now in to about the 40% and deselect. That's really just blended that in nicely. I'm then going to create a new layer, tap on it, and we're going to put on the clipping mask, which creates a little arrow, links it to the layer underneath, which does a very similar thing to the alpha lock. Just means that whenever we add something now, again, it's restricted and the gaps will still remain. We're also going to go to the little N on the layer, tap on it, and scroll down to the Add Blend Mode. I'm going to go in with the Rainforest brush, again the spacing at 45%, and I'm going to use the fifth colour on the top row. I'm going to put the size about 7% and the opacity pretty low at about 10%. And I'm just going to start tapping in. You could just do a line straight across, but I want it to be a little bit more random than that. So just tap in a bit more erratically. We want to really create a random kind of texture, and then as it comes further down, it can start to kind of bunch together a little bit more. Like so. And then in addition on this layer, I'm going to go in with the clouds brush within elements, still the fifth color. I'm going to put the brush size maybe at 6%, 30% strength, and then go for some of these shapes that really have a particular kind of distinct noticeable form. So if we go for a very distinct shape here, we can just kind of clip the bottom of it a little bit. And we're going to imagine that the sun is coming from here, so it really is going to just reflect off the underside of many of these clouds. And when we have a really good sense of them, a good kind of outline of them, we can just highlight the underneath of them. And then as we come a little bit further down, we're not going to notice the original shape of the cloud anyway, but generally we're going to keep that as a kind of, if we go into this area, this kind of a shape. As long as we stick to that kind of formation, that kind of texture across the whole canvas, then it will start to pull together and make sense. Quite a lot of tapping, I'm afraid, but sometimes it's just the nature of working on a tablet with a glass screen. Take a few minutes to do that. Once we've got a little bit further down, we can then reduce the size of the brush to maybe about 4% and continue. And we don't want to do too much of the bright colour at the very edges. We want to keep more of that in towards the centre. You can see the texture starting to build up, and it just takes a few minutes, but actually the effect is really quite good. We can use different kind of brushes to help us to get part of the way there, but sometimes you can't beat just the manual application of texture. And I wouldn't want to anyway. I do think that it is important that you kind of keep in touch with the painting itself. If you're too reliant upon the brush texture to do all of the labour for you, and I think you get a little bit more removed from the actual image itself. Okay, so I'll go to a new layer, tap on it, and also put on the clipping mask. And I'm also going to change the little N blend mode to add. Better to keep it on separate layers. I quite like what we've got on that layer. I don't want to ruin it. We'll then go from the 5th to the 6th colour, and we're going to continue with a focus a little bit more in the center now. And we're coming round, or down rather, just a little bit under halfway. So maybe you could start at the bottom this time. And we'll also turn it down to 3% size, still at 30% strength. Again, a little bit of a flattening out this time, rather than the obvious shapes like this. When we get onto this horizon point, maybe we could just have a flattening out of those textures. Maybe they can merge together as bands, and once we get a little bit higher up, we can start just manually tapping that in. A little bit of pressure is necessary with this brush too. Again, avoid the outer edges. The sun is just obviously going to have its greatest impact in the very center areas. This whole kind of region is going to be the most impacted, so we can bring some of that brighter color up a little bit here in the center. Again, lots of tapping, just takes a few minutes. It's quite a satisfying kind of building up of this appearance anyway. Stay on the same layer, but we'll go to the next color, which is even more yellow-orange. So we're on the 7th color. Again, just go over some of these. We're having the sun in the center here. We're going to apply the sun as a separate layer, but we're already creating a kind of context for it. We're brightening up. Could almost get away without even adding an exact sun in the scene, because we're adding so much brightness into that area anyway. I'll zoom in just a little bit. Bring some of those yellow bits a bit higher up, maybe space them apart a little bit more as well. In places anyway. That's starting to work quite nicely. I'm just going to take those top 2 layers. I'll go on the top one, in fact, tap on it and merge down. It just brings them together. Now that I was confident that I liked both of those layers, then it's fine to do that. I'll just go to the adjustments, the Gaussian blur, and just blur it in very slightly. So maybe about 3% and deselect. We'll come back to the sky. We're going to move forward with the rest of the landscape and come back and refine it a little bit later. So I'm going to go to my layers, create a new layer, layer 5. I'm going to go to my colors, forget the top row for now. We're going to go for the first color on the middle row. I'm going to go to the airbrushing, soft brush will do. Put it down, 2% size, 100% opacity. And I'm going to place a line just underneath that glow. I'm going to start on the outer, beyond the edges actually. It doesn't matter, it doesn't need to be straight because you can hold it at the other end. Snaps to a straight line. Now I haven't released the Apple Pencil off the screen yet. I'll move it so it's clearly not horizontal. The other hand, put my finger down and then it sets it to the horizontal for you, really precisely. We'll go to the transform and we'll just move it down a little bit so it gives us a little bit of clearance. Then on the same layer, I'm going to go to the organic rainforest brush, but I'm going to slide and reset it to its original settings. Again, we're going to go in with the first color on the middle row. Turn it down, maybe 3% size, 100% opacity. And then just above that line, we're going to add some textures in there. In fact, maybe just a little bit further down, 2% size. Maybe at this side, we can have them, space them apart, some trees. Some areas where it bands together. Other areas perhaps where they just get a little bit taller. You decide. Something like this. I'm going to create a new layer, layer 6. I'm going to go in with the soft brush with an airbrushing. I'm going to go for the second color on the middle row. Put the brush size maybe 10%, 100% opacity. And we're just going to fill in this bottom section. Just careful when you get up to the very edge. I don't care if it slightly overlaps, and you'll see why in a moment. Just careful not to go above the texture along the very top. And then going to move layer 5 so it's on top of layer 6. And you can see therefore now it reinstates that nice line. Go back to layer 5, create a new layer above that. I'm going to go to the end, change the normal blend mode to add once more. I'm going to go to the third color on the middle row. Still with a soft brush with an airbrushing, 3% size, 10% strength. I'm just going to start kind of just grazing along that line. It's not in a super precise way, just bringing some of that glow down into the land in a quite kind of pleasing way. It just reflects some of that light down here. Maybe turn it down a touch. Low on the 2%. Just slightly graze across the line there. Have it kind of dissipate out at the edge. Bring it over here, similar. We don't want to have a super sharp line over there. Bring it across here. And we can have some bands that are not quite part of the top edge. So sort of splitting of bands as it comes further down, and that's fine. Just extend that a little bit more. blend it out. Then I'm going to create a new layer, layer 8. I'm going to go in with the rainforest brush. Again, it's at the default settings now because we reset it. I'm going to go in with the 4th color on the middle row. 3% size, 80% strength. Just a little bit down from there and from there. We're just going to do a line of that across. Maybe just go over the bottom edge of that a little bit. And then I'm just going to bring that color down. Don't need to labor over that. Perhaps I'll put it up to 100%. In fact, so just go over that a little bit more. We're definitely going to have some darker colors here near the bottom. Create a new layer, layer 9. I'm going to tap on it and put on the clipping mask. So again, it links it to layer 8. I'm going to go in with some darker colors. I'm going to go for the 6th color on the middle row. Airbrushing, soft brush is fine. 20% size, 100% opacity. A band of that. Slightly graze it higher up, not too much. It's mainly down here. Then I'm going to go for the 7th color and just aim for the bottom area like so. Then we can go to the adjustments, the Gaussian blur, and blur that in because again it's on clipping mask, so it won't blur up into the rest of the scene. Blur that up to, well, 25% is absolutely fine. Deselect. I'm going to create a new layer, layer 10. I'm going to go in with the inking studio pen. I'm going to go in with the 7th color on the middle row, 100% size and 100% opacity, and well, we're just going to start building in our tree. Let's go over it a few times, get a really kind of nice gnarly tree trunk. Don't worry about the base of it too much, we're going to blend that in. Do this as kind of circled shapes for the branch initially, because then it just gives it a really nice kind of gnarled look. We won't do that for every branch, but just initially, I think, just to give it that kind of knobbly appearance is quite an interesting way of doing it. Don't over-exaggerate that, though. Then we're going to turn that down from 100% size, maybe to 20% size. Zoom in. And then we're quickly going to end up with branches that just have a little bit more grace to them, and then release the pressure as we go further along, like so. Again, press on, give it some twists and turns, release the pressure as you go further along too. And we're just going to continue that process. Press, release, allow it to have some character, some kind of wobble to it. And these are just the branches that underpin. We're going to add foliage to this, obviously. But we need a few of these to begin with. Okay, so you don't need to start with too many. Then we're going to create a new layer, layer 11, and we're going to go in with the organic rainforest brush, but we again going to put it up to maybe the 45% spacing. Click done. 2% size, 90% strength, and we're just going to start building in some foliage, circling it in. We just want blocks of foliage in there. So you don't want it completely evenly distributed either. You definitely want kind of like it amassing more into obvious, dense areas, perhaps at the outer edges. But we definitely want to have some gaps remaining through, so we can see sky coming through bits of the tree. I don't mind if it encroaches towards the sun. We'll do something to that a little bit later just to make it pick up some of that glow. So something like this. Again, we're just getting the overall shape to a place that we're happy with it. Then we can go back to layer 10, back with the inking studio pen, and if we need to, we can just further refine some of these branches. If you want to add more of them. going to add more foliage anyway, but there's no harm in adding more branches. Back to the foliage, layer 11, and I'm probably going to go in with the organic snow gum brush, which I'm going to reset. Tapping it again, I'm going to go to the color dynamics and I'm going to turn all the top sliders to none, just in this top section. And click done. Down to about 6% size, 100% opacity, and I'm just going to mix in this texture in with the rainforest brush. Perhaps I'll turn it down a little bit more, 5%. Just tap it in and around some of these edges. We want the two to work in conjunction with each other. Something like this. Then on that layer we can just adjustments, Gaussian blur, and just blur it in a little bit. So maybe 2%, deselect. I'm going to go back to layer 7. We're going to start adding the sun in now. We need to start bringing in the glow of this scene. So we're going to go in with the medium brush with an airbrushing. I'm going to go for the 9th color, this bright yellow. I'm going to zoom in, 3% size, 100% opacity. And we're just going to set the sun into this kind of location. Just tap it in a few times. Then we're going to go to the adjustments, the bloom, and ramp that up, 100%. Deselect. And that already sets a glow for the sun. I'm going to dial it back to the 8th color. I'm going to go in with this soft brush with an airbrushing, and I'm going to turn it down to 2% size, 15% strength. And then in and around that sun, I'm going to start building in really vibrant clouds now that are just picking up the light of that sun. And that's just going to really start to intensify what we've got. We can run it along the length of the sky. Just be mindful it will obscure the clouds, or rather the trees, which I don't mind to a certain extent, but just be a little bit mindful that we can be destructive here, so just be careful. Move it around this area though, and it's definitely important to start building that up. I quite like the fact that it will interrupt the top edge of that tree line to some extent. I think actually is a positive, but not too much. Zoom out, check it. Perhaps we'll turn it down a little bit more into the 1% size. And again, we can just fine tune some of this texture. We can build it up. Obviously this is behind the tree, so don't need to worry about that. Behind this tree anyway. Again, in a similar way to the method we were using up here, applying this texture, might just extend it a little bit more this way. Build it across, put it up a little bit more, 2% size again, perhaps lower on the strength, 5%. That allows us to just really get in there and be a bit bolder. Let's go for some in the middle, maybe 10%. Again, we can continue to tap in this yellow, building that glow upwards again once more. Add it into the textures we've already got. And that's really building in that glow in a really satisfying way, I think. Starting to bring this scene to life a little bit more. Just going to go back to the 6th color and continue to add some of this as we come further up, and it's just kind of in the center area really. We can have some of it at the outer edges, but not as much. Perhaps we've got to go back to that really strong 5th color. It's a really nice warm color. And that's certainly going to be relevant out at the edges. We'll keep the yellows for the center area. And these warmer, kind of more orange colors out at the peripheral. Okay, I'm going to go to the very top, create a new layer up there, layer 12. Change the blend mode from normal to add. I'm going to go in with the soft brush with an airbrushing. I'm going to go in with the third colour on the middle row, 10% strength. Perhaps I'll put it up maybe to 40% size, tap it a few times on the sun, 4 times. Perhaps I'll just put it up really big, 100%, tap on it, and that spreads it all the way across the canvas. 80%, one tap, and that's really starting to build it together. I quite like that. I'm going to move to the 6th colour on the top row, turn it down, 15% size, 10% strength, on the sun, couple of taps there, 3 maybe, turn it down even more, 2% size, 5% strength, maybe just a couple of sunbeams coming out there, just on that edge. I think that works quite nicely. Sells that illusion a little bit better. And you notice that the glow that we've added here has also faded some of the bits of the tree in a way that works nicely too. I'm just going to go back to layer 11, tap on the N and just take it from max 100%, just dial it back a little bit, but not too much, maybe 96%, and it just makes it a hint lighter than the branches, which I think in a way that works better. I'm going to go to the tree layer again, tap on it, create a layer above that, but underneath the glow. I'm going to go in with the 6th colour on the middle row, reset the rainforest brush, go in with that, 2% size, 40% strength, and well, we just need to blend in our tree with the kind of ground areas. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to set like the bank of a little river. It's going to twist and turn in here, and we're just getting the beginning of it here, so just a little bit of an edge. We can come over here to this side too, maybe just twist it this way, so another little bit that sticks out, just a hint of it to begin with. Move that across. Then I'm going to change to the 7th colour, which is darker. Same brush, same settings, just as we come further down, we can notice that a little bit more. Again, just twist it out here. So then you get like a winding section of water, and you can start to see it coming to life a little bit more now. It's bringing it together. Just twist it in. Quite textured at this point, and I'm absolutely fine with that. Quite like this. Go to the layers again, create a new layer, layer 14, and I'm going to move along to the 8th colour. 2% size, and even lower now, so about 20% strength. And just where the tree hits the ground, in fact, we're going to turn that down even more, so really low on the 2%. We're having a merging point now where this is actually a kind of grey colour, but it appears slightly almost towards the greens. So some nice colours just cutting across. A few bands of this. Just tap it in. Tap it in along here. Maybe put that up. 3% size. Come down to this area, just tap it in. Nothing overly precise. Just creating texture again. Back to our colours. Perhaps I'll go for the 9th colour. As we get closer to us, we get a slightly different quality to that colour. Like this. Okay, from the top layer, I'm going to go to the wrench, copy canvas, and paste. And go to the layers. There is actually now an entire version of the whole image on top as the top layer, flattened. I'm going to go to the selection, rectangle, and then I'm just going to grab slightly a rectangle like this, and it clips the bottom of the tree and it's just a little bit down from the sun, and then that whole bottom section is now selected. Tap on the layer and clear it. Then on this top version, I'm going to go to the transform, flip horizontally, and just move it down so that it kind of mirrors that horizon, like so, which is quite beautiful in itself, but we're not going to stop there. We're going to go adjustments, motion blur, and blur it in about 15%, selection, freehand, and I'm just going to grab the bottom section, close the loop, but we don't want it to be jarring on that edge, so we're going to go to the feather. I'm going to feather it in about 20%. Adjustments, motion blur again, and just continue to blur that in to about the 25% and deselect both. So you've got a really nice blur now, which kind of creates a water look straight away. Then we're going to go with the eraser, and the eraser set to the soft brush with an airbrushing, 5% size, 100% opacity, and we're just going to start shutting down, removing some of this to begin with. Obviously we want the tree to have land to sit on. We want to restate some of this texture in here that we've created as well. We want all of this side over here to be reclaimed down to the bottom area, and then really we want just a section in here, and this is where we start to decide the kind of the path of our little stream or river. So I'm going to have a section that juts out here, rounds off, section that comes out at this point, comes down here perhaps. It's quite severe at this point, so maybe we turn it from 100% strength to 50, and then down to maybe 3% size, and then we can start just chipping away a little bit more gradually. Turn it down even more, 2%, pull this bit out, again just continues to chip away. Maybe turn it up again, 3%, and just shapes here. Make this bit jut out, heading towards the sun again, just encroaching towards that center area, perhaps. And you can decide this, you're not absolutely restricted to the way that I'm showing you it. I'm going to create a new layer, layer 16. I'm going to go for the colors down here, so maybe the 10th color on the middle row. I'm going to go in with the organic rainforest brush. Again, it's been reset. 2% size, 30% strength. And I'm just going to start building in fact, let's go even lower. Let's go really low on the 2%. Start building in some of this texture again. And we can take it right up to the water's edge now. Now we've got a clearer sense of where it is. What I might do is move that glow above that, actually. We don't want to lose, by adding some of this colour in here, we don't want to lose that glow. It shouldn't go over the top of it. Glow should remain at the top. So we're still on layer 16 though. Adding some of this texture, highlighting some of the bumps, lumps. Reclaim some shapes. That's starting to create a really quite pleasing effect on the ground. The bank there, perhaps we'll go for a darker colour, so we'll go back to the 7th colour on the middle row, and we just need to give it a little bit of a kind of shadow to give it some solid feel along that edge. Turn it up, 60% strength. We need a little bit of darkness there, and it's not going to destroy the glow, so we don't need to worry about that. So we'll just blend in. We'll go back to the 6th colour, blend in the base of this tree with the ground a little bit. Have just hints of that darker colour in other areas. I'm going to go to the top layer. I'm going to go in with the soft brush with an airbrushing. I'm going to go for the 8th colour on the top row. 2% size, 30% strength. And we just need to be mindful that this river doesn't just come to an abrupt stop. Perhaps it could just meander out of view there a little bit and you can't quite see where it goes, and that's, I think, an acceptable end to it. Perhaps we'll go to the 9th colour. Can't quite see where it's going, but it's going perhaps just a hint that way. Bring some more bands. Whoops. 30% is quite strong. 20%. Might just go for the 3rd colour on the bottom row. Go back to layer 16 and soft brush, 2% size, 15% opacity or so. Just add a hint of a blue colour in here, not too much, just a hint of it. I think it just gives it a nice appearance there if we just bring a hint of it across. Don't want to overdo that. Just going to go to the fourth color on the middle row, and we need a little hint of a reflection there for this area especially. So 2% size, 60% strength, and just a little bit of that slightly different color, just a little less intensely dark. We don't want to overdo this. Just a hint of it coming in here, and then starting to disappear out, and it just goes a long way. Going with the smudge to soft brush, 2% size, 20% strength or so, and just slightly soften that edge in a little bit. I don't want it to be too severe. Maybe just push it around a little bit, in fact, like that. Let's go back to the tree, tap on it and put on the alpha lock. I'm going to go in with the slightly lighter color. We'll go for the first color on the middle row with the burnt tree brush within charcoals, maybe 6% size and 20% strength or so. Bring in a little bit of texture in either side of the tree. Don't intend to do too much of that, just twist it up there a little bit. It just stops it being completely flat. Just a hint of something can actually go quite a long way, something like that. Then adjustments, Gaussian blur, and again, just a hint of blur, maybe 2%, deselect. Okay, I'm going to leave this at this point. I haven't quite decided whether I perceive it as a sunset or a sunrise. Perhaps you could leave in the comments which you feel it actually looks the most like. I'm going to push this a little bit further over at my Patreon page, add some more refinements and more details. There is a link in the description for my Patreon if you're interested in that. Otherwise, don't forget to hit subscribe, and I shall see you back here soon. Bye for now.